New York, the ultimate symbol of American power, the capital of the world. But the foundations of this ultra-modern metropolis are crumbling. Alex, a 36-year-old actor, came face to face with this reality one warm September evening 2 years ago.
I was pretty surprised by the amount of rainfall and water. You know, they said New York City got more rain in one day on September 1st than it gets in the entire months of September, so.
The downpour didn't deter Alex from taking the subway, the main mode of transport for 9 million New Yorkers. But on the L line, a key route linking Brooklyn to Manhattan, his journey turned into a scene from a disaster film.
So I think it might have been close to here. So we had the train coming in. Yeah, this looks right, or maybe even a little bit further down, that red pipe. And I got out, and there was this massive wall of water coming down on the Manhattan-bound side. I started taking this video. I mean, it was like Niagara Falls. You know, it was just this crazy amount of water this guy jumps through. Everybody's just trying to get home.
The torrential rain was flooding the station. Within seconds, Alex had water up to his ankles.
Whenever the station started filling with water, I started worrying about electricity and could that be conducted through the water? I don't know. So yeah, that's when I got out of there.
That evening, similar surreal scenes were unfolding all over New York. Flash floods submerged subway platforms, while passengers tried desperately to find a way out. Miraculously, no one was killed or injured. But the subway, which normally runs 24/7, had to close. It was a failure for the MTA, the New York transport system. Karen Gregorian, one of their technical officials, took us to one of the 300 pumping stations meant to siphon water out of the subway.
Pump has to stay always in automatic operation. My big pump and small pump. Certain areas, they are high tides together with the storm creates a very significant impact to our system.
But this system has hardly been updated since the start of the 20th century and is now out of date.
All these pump plants, they are all designed during construction of the subway system, most of them. 120 about our pump plants are being upgraded for a bigger inlet size to bring the water out of the tracks quicker, to upgrade the size of the pumping equipment and get bigger pumps and more units.
These upgrades have become a necessity because even in dry weather, the subway is always on the verge of flooding. Between groundwater and the ocean, seepage is a constant challenge. More than 50 million litres of water have to be siphoned out every day for the trains to run. So even small hiccups like pipes bursting, as Alex experienced, can mean mobile emergency pumps have to be lowered onto the tracks by hand. It's a precarious and obsolete system that makes this city a castle built on sand. And for a majority of Americans like Alex, this is an analogy that rings true across the country.
We have a lot of crumbling infrastructure. You know, our bridges, you know, we can't seem to fund, you know, creating new things and keeping the things we have in good repair. So yeah, it feels very symbolic of some of the pieces of the rest of the country.
This is the underside of the United States. Although a dominant superpower on the world stage, on the ground, its infrastructure is decaying, with roads riddled with potholes and railway tracks falling into disrepair. And when disaster strikes, there's no hiding the widespread deterioration. The incident in Baltimore in which a bridge hit by a cargo ship collapsed is just the latest example. While the ship instigated the catastrophe, experts have been quick to condemn the bridge's instability. And all over the country, there are thousands of other bridges in similarly poor condition.
Want a piece of the bridge?
Wow, 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 wow.
See? Look at it. That's what's happened to this whole bridge.
The country was founded and established through the construction of sophisticated infrastructure. But for decades, the powers that be have not invested enough to maintain it. And now, the deterioration can no longer be ignored. This negligence has put the health and safety of the American people at risk.
Oh my God! That's bad.
In Hawaii, mismanagement of the power grid sparked off a huge wildfire, causing 100 deaths and wiping a town off the map.
It kind of looks a little bit like a small version of Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
In other areas, it's the public water system that has collapsed, depriving whole cities of drinkable water.
The water has a bad smell, a urine smell or a sewage smell from the infrastructure's breaking down.
Elsewhere, it's the railway network which is poorly maintained by private companies, resulting in the derailment of trains transporting dangerous materials in residential areas.
I can't be in here. I don't feel good at all. I'm sorry.
Faced with the crisis, President Biden has allocated $1.2 trillion to funding improvements to infrastructure. But will it be enough? In the meantime, Americans are demanding justice.
Show me what democracy looks like!
How did the richest country in the world end up here? We pull back the curtain on this superpower struggling to stay on its feet. Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. The historic capital of American steel. The city boasts close to 500 bridges, most of which were built at the start of the 20th century. Many of them are in poor condition and at risk of collapse. Just ask Tom. He used to work for the city. Until recently, he managed the maintenance of its bridges.
Pittsburgh has more variety of bridges than any other city in the world. From cable bridges, suspension bridges, the different types of engineering on these bridges. It's just a shame the city don't take care of their bridges.
An experience that has left him disgruntled, because despite his warnings, in January 2022, a road bridge he was responsible for collapsed. The 140-meter-long Fern Hollow Bridge. Miraculously, no one was killed and only 10 people were injured. In a dramatic coincidence, Joe Biden was on his way to Pittsburgh that day to present his expansive infrastructure plan.
Were you worried that there had been an explosion or that there had been
We weren't
collapse?
sure whether the gas had caused this. We just weren't sure of that.
Investigation revealed that gas wasn't involved. The structure had simply given way. This red bus was passing through at the time. Its mounted cameras at the front and rear captured the collapse.
When I got that call that morning from 911 and I went out there, I was in awe. It was just, I could not believe what I was looking at. And I was just totally dumbfounded. This is what happens when people get reports and don't do nothing with it. My first time out on that bridge, when we were working on it, checking it out, the holes, I mean, some of the holes, I could have stuck my head through them on the main support legs on the bridge. It just blew me away, and for them the city not to do anything.
According to Tom, disaster could strike here again, as other local bridges are also in terrible condition.
There's something to see.
Especially this one, located at the heart of Pittsburgh's historic district. Built in 1938 and 240 meters in length, the Charles Anderson Bridge is one of the city center's main thoroughfares.
Want a piece of the bridge? Want a piece of it? See? Look at it.
The metal is so corroded that it can be broken by hand.
That's what's happened to this whole bridge.
The structure has been ravaged by rust. The bridge hasn't received any maintenance in years.
I can't remember the last time it was painted.
And the lack of upkeep has taken its toll. Large pieces have even started to fall off.
Wow. It's about 60 pounds, 70 pounds. Where'd this come from? Wow. Can you imagine if that falling down? This hits him in the head, it's going to kill him.
The region's cold winters necessitate the use of salt on the roads. Combined with water and frost, this makes for an extremely corrosive cocktail.
If you don't maintain that rivet, these rivets, you get moisture inside. And that's what the water gets in, freezes, and it pushes. You know, and then it breaks down the steel, and that's what you're having.
Tom also alerted City Hall to the concerning state of this structure. But once again, his warning fell on deaf ears.
I reported it. I was told, don't worry about it.
Tom ultimately resigned in protest, but it wasn't until a year after the collapse of Fern Hollow Bridge that City Hall finally decided to close this bridge to vehicles, and the wider problem still hasn't been addressed.
There's a lot of bridges in the city in this condition. You know, it's just a matter of time. If they don't act now and fast, there'll be other bridges collapsing also.
The closure of Charles Anderson Bridge has redirected the 20,000 vehicles that used it every day towards this much smaller bridge.
We're looking at the bridge.
According to Tom, it's just as damaged. What's more, it wasn't designed to accommodate this many cars, driving the risk of collapse even higher.
The section here was broken away. It was pushing out. And if it would have fallen out, if the concrete would have fallen out, the bearing and everything would have collapsed under its own weight. So they did emergency repairs to do this work right here. And it was only supposed to be temporary because this bridge was supposed to be replaced. Because of the other bridge being closed now, this bridge has to stay here much longer.
Tom has always felt that City Hall prioritizes spending on improvements that are immediately visible to the taxpayer. He sees the budget he was given as evidence of this.
My last year on the job, I had like somewhere around about $4 or $5 million to do replacement steps and rehab steps.
And for the bridges?
$500,000. So I spent over $4 million on steps and I only spent $500,000 on bridges.
That doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
The day of the Fern Hollow Bridge collapse, Joe Biden announced a $40 billion investment in repairing the country's 46,000 damaged bridges. But experts estimate there are actually 5 times as many in need of major repair. This lack of maintenance is affecting every area of infrastructure, making the daily life of Americans in some cities a waking nightmare. In the South, an entire city seems to have been completely forgotten. Jackson is the capital of Mississippi, the poorest state in the country. Apart from some picturesque streets in the center, the city has fallen into ruin. Its pothole-ridden roads, dilapidated buildings and abandoned shops make for a shocking sight in the world's richest country. Gino, a veteran who now runs a charitable organization, has witnessed Jackson's decline firsthand.
In just a 20-year time period, it went from being one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city to what you see today, you know.
At least 4,000 houses here are abandoned, the result of a downward spiral that started in 1970, when Mississippi, then a segregationist state, was required by the courts to end segregation in schools.
When they allowed black people to move into South Jackson, all of the white people left. They left, they just picked up and left.
This mass exodus of the white population had immediate consequences, including a sharp drop in tax revenue for the city. Without funds, the local infrastructure deteriorated, prompting fresh departures. Jackson went on to lose 60,000 residents, more than a quarter of its population.
That's just how deep it is.
Like Gino, those who stayed feel abandoned.
This pothole at its deepest point probably right at almost 5 feet at its deepest point. Why are not a lot of these holes fixed, you know? I know a lot of them got to do with money, right? And The city deprived of money. You see all those abandoned houses? Guess what is not being paid? Tax. So now we can't afford to do stuff like a pothole.
But the biggest scourge lowering Jackson residents' quality of life is the failing water network. The pipes are riddled with poorly patched up holes, allowing lead pollution and bacteria into the water supply. After a flood at the end of 2022, brown sludge started coming out of the taps, as this video by a resident shows. Like the rest of the city, Jean, a 44-year-old widow, was supplied drinking water by the army for 2 months. Nowadays, she has to source it on her own.
Because it's a filter, because our water was brown, and it's not brown today. But normally it do be brown. They say boil it 5 minutes. I don't trust them. So now I don't cook. I don't brush my teeth. I bathe in it because, of course, I don't have a choice. But cooking and putting it in my mouth, no, I don't do. I do wash my dishes, but I have a jug of Clorox always here. Because whatever contaminating in that water, I feel like my Clorox will clean it.
To make matters worse, the water pressure is extremely weak.
That's the water pressure from either side all the way up. That's the maximum.
And the main sewer line is constantly clogged, as in many streets in the city. Jean, who owns her house, can't take it anymore.
It was the worst mistake of my life, buying a house here. The capital. This is the capital of Mississippi, Jackson. And it's like garbage.
A federal judge has recently intervened by transferring the city's water management to an independent body. As they await repairs, Jackson's 140,000 residents have been left to fend for themselves. This morning, Gino and his charitable organisation have put together a special initiative for the first day of school. On the agenda is the distribution of school supplies, basic necessities, and, of course, water.
A lot of the school teachers don't want to let the kids drink water from the water fountain. So we try to go ahead and have water together so that they can drink good drinking water.
Across the nation, the American people are bearing the brunt of these structural failures. And the disasters seem to be ramping up, not least on the country's railroads. Since the conquest of the American West, railways have always been built by private companies for use by their giant freight trains. Derailments and collisions are staggeringly frequent. Every day, there's at least one accident that results in a hazardous spill. One extreme case left the whole country reeling. A derailment that unleashed a chemical catastrophe. It took place a year ago in East Palestine, a village in Ohio. Now, every time Zuza, a young 31-year-old mother, goes home, she makes a pit stop first. Not to eat or drink, but to protect herself.
This is my gas mask, my respirator. I use this so I can at least enter my house for more than a few seconds. I got it at a hardware store in town. Should be wearing a hazmat suit, but this is the next best thing. The filters in here are meant to keep the particulate matter and the gases at least somewhat filtered so it's not directly entering my lungs through my nose and mouth. This is my only choice of protection between me and the environment in East Palestine.
Zuza takes these extreme precautions because of the health scares their village of 4,700 residents has been experiencing since the accident.
I don't really feel very comfortable coming into town. So, I mean, for me, the atmosphere is uncomfortable and frustrating. Generally, though, the people who are living here are either getting sick and afraid and don't really want to be here but feel trapped, or they are in complete denial.
The East Palestine's curse are these tracks belonging to Norfolk Southern, one of the main freight companies in the United States. Their network links up the gigantic petrochemical plants in the northeast of the country. But instead of circumventing the village, the railway track cuts East Palestine in two. It's a highway on rails where every 30 minutes, just meters away from residents' houses, freight trains of up to 200 wagons drive past, many of them carrying toxic materials.
We're gonna go over the railroad tracks. The train was right across this. The derailment site's literally right here.
On the 3rd of February 2023, a freight train close to 3 kilometers in length derailed in the middle of town. The wagons loaded with hazardous materials caught fire. When they heard the alert sirens, Zuza and her partner went outside to see what was happening.
Oh my God! That's bad, dude. That's out of control. Oh shit.
She filmed the gigantic blaze from her car.
So it was burning for about a half a mile of track. It was very long. You can see the size of this cloud just compared to the houses. It was just enormous. And this was about an hour after it actually derailed.
Oh my.
That night, officials ordered the evacuation of a radius of 1,600 meters around the derailment, home to 50% of the village's residents. 48 hours after the incident, to put out the still raging fire, the railway company made a radical decision. With official approval, they blew up 5 wagons containing a toxic substance. The result? A mushroom cloud visible from 30 kilometers away. 5 days later, the residents were allowed to return, but like Zuza, 200 families are still refusing to move back into their houses.
My eyes are burning down here real bad. I don't really want to be here much longer. I'm just gonna grab my mail and throw it in here real quick.
She lived in a rented apartment in this house with her son and partner.
So this is a duplex. Other people live here.
A peaceful life abruptly turned upside down.
How do you feel?
Sick. We pulled a bunch of stuff out trying to come back one time. So there's just stuff everywhere. We had to leave so quickly. But when they walked through, I cried because it smelled so bad. I can't be in here. It's not, I don't feel good at all. I'm sorry. I mean, you guys are more than welcome to walk around, but I don't want to be in here anymore.
But Zuza is still required to pay rent. A situation made even more challenging because the derailment disaster cost her the work that previously paid her bills. The evacuated residents were rehomed at the expense of the railway company Norfolk Southern. Zuza is currently living here, 50 kilometers from East Palestine, with her 9-year-old son.
All right, so this is our hotel room.
Today, Madik is doing well, but on the night of the derailment, Zuza feared for her child's life.
Something was seriously wrong, and he was hanging off the side of his bed, vomiting everywhere, shaking, gasping for air, saying, I need water, I can't breathe. I don't want to say panicked, but I immediately was on high alert at that point. So I made sure he was okay to walk, and I said, we got to go right now.
After the disaster, Madik's school closed. For the past 4 months, his studies have taken place online. But for Zuza, living in cramped temporary accommodation is preferable to returning to East Palestine. As we speak, the area is still in the process of being decontaminated. Trucks hose down the streets in scenes reminiscent of nuclear meltdown cleanup. And even if officially the environment is no longer dangerous, still, an independent expert and former firefighter specializing in chemical hazards has serious doubts.
As you can see, there are
watering everything down to try to keep the dust down, but the dust is what's got the contaminant. That's why I'm going to wear an N95 mask.
Yet the workers employed by the railway company are working without protection. But they're not in the mood for a discussion.
You guys have to turn around. You're not allowed past the bar. Go that way.
They probably have no idea what's going on. They just have jobs to do, told what to do, and that's what they're doing. Given what you see and what's going on and all the dirt, they're also not wearing proper PPE. So they should at least have this on.
According to Sil, the cleaning of the site poses a threat to everyone in the area, including the residents who have moved back in.
See those, right over there, see where those big mounds of plastic are? Yeah, they're digging up contaminated dirt. They're storing it under plastic so it doesn't go anywhere. They're trucking it out, then they're trucking in new dirt to cover it over. All these houses are affected. They're continually being exposed from stuff that's being trucked out of there.
But this comes as no surprise to Sil. He's worked on numerous train accidents, some of which involved Norfolk Southern. The company's reputation has taken a nosedive in recent years, with 7 derailments since the end of 2022. Sil says the negligence seen in East Palestine is typical of how the company operates, driven by cost-cutting above all else. It's a theory supported by the initial investigations, especially analysis of this video filmed by a surveillance camera 30 kilometers before the accident. It shows flames on the wheels of a wagon.
What happened with this car is it had an overheated bearing. That bearing gave way, it caused one car to derail, and then they just stack up behind each other in an accordion fashion. Norfolk Southern and a few of the other railroad companies have gotten into cost-cutting measures to hurry up for what in the United States we call on-time delivery. So they're cutting down the amount of time that they're utilizing to inspect these cars at the rail yards.
Just 6 days after the derailment, trains started running again. This reminds Sil of the pressure put on him by Norfolk Southern when he was working on derailed trains as a firefighter.
They are very adamant about getting the rail lines opened. They keep using the quote, "We're losing $1 million a day if we don't get these cars through." And that's exactly, in my opinion, what they did. They hurried up and burned this stuff, covered it over, and got the rail line running and miraculously lifted the evacuation zones. We basically nuked a town with chemicals so we could get a rail line through.
The company has rushed to rebuild its infrastructure in exactly the same place, in the middle of town, while residents have been exposed to contaminants a second time via the cleanup operation. Leslie and Eric, who were told by authorities they could safely return home, no longer believe this was accurate.
You guys hear the train blowing? That stuff, it didn't come to us because we didn't pay attention to it. Now, every time that train whistle blows, it's a smack right into our face.
Since the couple are back, they've been afflicted with multiple health problems, including back-to-back bouts of bronchitis for Eric, but for Leslie, it's more serious.
Some pictures of my face. My face was the size of a basketball. Then my skin would turn to leather, and then it would peel, and I would scar. This is my foot. My skin never looked like this before. I was destroyed. The train wrecked. It totally devastated my life.
Like Leslie and Eric, many of the other residents of the village have developed strange symptoms. So they've banded together and called in help from a contamination specialist.
Scott, how are you?
Good. Scott is an independent tester who has agreed to work pro bono to give them a second opinion. He starts by collecting samples in Leslie and Eric's garden.
I'm taking a soil sample by the downspout here because we'll get an idea of everything that has flowed off this roof and concentrated in here. And try to, as you know, they're experiencing pretty severe symptoms here. And we're trying to figure out all the chemicals they've been exposed to. So this will help us do that.
Scott will also need to conduct analyses of the air inside the house, but Eric's insurance company has already done tests of its own.
But, okay, here's the full report.
After reading the reports, Scott doesn't beat around the bush.
This is indicative of other people getting sick. The semi-volatile organic compounds, they're all present here.
That's what I thought.
So I really don't even need to repeat this testing.
Okay.
Because this gives you what you need.
Okay.
For example, you see these benzo compounds. Benzo, anything with B-E-N-Z is bad. And once it gets in your body, can cause cancer and a whole host of other issues. This will help support a claim against the railroad, from what I'm seeing.
Okay.
Hang in, though. We're gonna get the truth. We're gonna get the truth.
I appreciate you.
Hey, see you later, Scott. Thanks. I'm afraid for my children. I'm afraid for my fiance of getting cancer.
While they await the result of the class action lawsuit, the residents of East Palestine have decided to protest in Columbus, the state capital of Ohio. They want a state of emergency to be declared, which would enable them to get financial aid. A year after the catastrophe, they're still awaiting a decision from the federal court. There's no denying that Washington is currently snowed under with urgent cases of essential infrastructure failure. The Pentagon, the HQ of the US Department of Defense, raised the alarm on the vulnerability of the country's electrical grid in a report published back in 2019. In it, the power grid was described as fragile and aging. The report even highlighted an unacceptably high risk of an extended outage. Throughout the country, thousands of kilometers of overhead power lines attached to wooden utility poles are showing signs of disrepair. In Hawaii, the 50th American state, it was the failure of these high-voltage power lines that sparked off a giant, deadly wildfire. The island of Maui has long been renowned as an idyllic holiday destination. Until the 8th of August 2023. Fanned by strong winds, huge fires tore through the village of Lahaina, home to 12,000 residents. In less than a day, 80% of it was razed to the ground. It was the deadliest fire in the United States in more than a century, taking 100 lives and leaving thousands homeless.
In my mind, it kind of looks a little bit like a small, very small version of Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
Chuck is one of the few whose house didn't catch fire. He was therefore allowed to return home.
So here we go through the checkpoint.
For security reasons, the majority of Lahaina is a restricted zone controlled by the army.
How's it going?
This is the first time cameras have been allowed to film here since the military locked down the town.
Did you guys get the okay?
Yeah, you guys got okay.
All right, cool.
The atmosphere in the secure zone is almost post-apocalyptic.
Hey guys. Good morning.
Decontamination teams are still searching for toxic residue left by the ashes.
There's a good example of how hot it was, and you can see the molten aluminum from the vehicles melting. The fire was so hot and it moved so quickly they couldn't do anything to stop it.
The fire miraculously stopped a few meters away from his house.
Maybe 5% of the homes up here survive, and this is one of them. So.
Even his garden is intact.
For me, not much has changed. I come back here, I do my barbecue. I was lucky, very lucky.
The local electrical grid had already been accused of starting a fire on a previous occasion 5 years ago. According to Chuck, this earlier red flag was not taken seriously by officials.
In 2018, they lost about 20 or 21 structures. The fire almost made it into Lahaina, but they were able to stop it, and no one did anything about it. And they had 5 years to figure something out.
The electricity poles still standing are in terrible condition.
We're still in a hurricane zone, and the infrastructure just isn't up to it here. And 80-mile-an-hour winds are about the time when lines start coming down. And you look at a lot of these telephone poles, they're old, they're dried out, they're bent, they're cracked. I don't know a lot about electrical infrastructure, but I am a carpenter and I work a lot with wood. And I look at that telephone pole and I think it's a piece of crap.
And there's no doubt that the lack of maintenance of the power grid is behind the tragedy in Lahaina. In the upper reaches of the town, early evidence was captured by the surveillance camera at this bird sanctuary on the night of the 7th of August. Jennifer, the sanctuary's director, only discovered the footage the next day.
So this video is basically the start ignition of the fire. So out in this forest, you'll notice there's a big flash and the power goes out. This is the camera resetting. It takes a couple minutes for the camera to reset, and when the camera comes back online, it's in the exact same position that it was previously when we saw that initial flash. We are now seeing that the forest is on fire.
This fire was the first of several that hit the west of Maui. The firefighters managed to contain it, but still today, they remain on the alert because the danger isn't over.
Right there, Paul.
Right here, bro. Inside the roots right there. There's a little smoke popping out of these roots right here.
For Bill, the chief of the unit, the electrical origin of the fire is as clear as day. The power lines are not sufficiently protected.
A fire can start by branches rubbing on a bare electrical wire that's not insulated. It's going to create friction, heat. Power company has to trim all of the vegetation away from their lines. There's been talk for a long time that we could get away from that hazard by putting the lines underground.
Down in the town, this structural flaw had devastating consequences. The morning of the 8th, a power line fell to the ground, setting off the giant wildfire that ravaged Lahaina.
Hey, the power line is live, The power line.
This resident, who shared what he was seeing on Facebook, tried to extinguish the fire with a hose, but it wouldn't go out. And the failing electrical infrastructure continued to spread chaos as the fire raged on. All over the town, utility poles fell over and cables dropped to the ground. According to the electrical company themselves, more than half of the town's poles and transformers were affected, so much so that 2 key thoroughfares were blocked, forcing residents to abandon their cars and flee on foot.
That fire is moving, so I am going to make my way down to the water right now. I'm going.
Private company Hawaiian Electric, the only operator on the island, begrudgingly acknowledged responsibility for the starting of the fire. But according to them, the inability of the firefighters to put out the blaze was to blame for the tragedy. They declined to provide further comment.
You can call directly, but I can definitely have someone call you back.
2 months after the crisis, however, the company seems to have taken on board the necessity of protecting the power lines.
Just curiosity, what are you doing?
I'm putting this paint on. It's supposed to help the pole not catching fire as easy.
It's a fire repellent. It doesn't allow, when there's brush fires, it doesn't allow it to burn as easy.
It's a basic protective measure that should have been taken a long time ago.
We just started about a week ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Today, Hawaiian Electric is the subject of multiple lawsuits and is facing a colossal fine. The cost of the reconstruction of Lahaina is estimated at $5.5 billion. Across the country, citizens are taking legal recourse to demand responses, especially when their lives have been turned upside down. We're in North Carolina, in the small city of Hickory. Alicia visits this dead-end road regularly to honor the memory of her husband, Philip. It's here that he lost his life at the age of 47, leaving behind their 2 daughters, Amelia and Juliet. The moment her life changed forever, Alicia was at home with her oldest daughter.
Amelia came in the back and she's like, "Mommy, the police are here." And my heart just like sank. And it just not real. Like saying, "Are you, the wife of Philip Paxson?" And, I'm just like, where is he? Where is he? And they just said he was gone.
The tragedy took place one night in September 2022.
All alone in the dark. Like just trapped under water here.
In the glow of his headlights, Philip couldn't see that the road abruptly ended. His car plummeted 6 meters into the river, where he tragically drowned.
And at night, it's a totally different place. It looks like a pothole. I mean, your headlights are going to hit those guardrails, and it gives the illusion that the road continues. You can't see any of this. It's a dark spot.
The night of the incident, Philip was driving at roughly 40 kilometers per hour. Unfamiliar with the area, he was relying on Google Maps GPS. He wasn't under the influence of any alcohol or drugs, as the toxicology report confirmed. Google Maps directed him down this small road. In reality, what lay ahead was the collapsed bridge. There was no signage and no barriers to stop cars driving that way.
These barricades were not here. There was nothing here. So my friends, almost 48 hours later, they brought them out and dropped them here. Said, we put the barricades up so nobody else would get hurt. And I just fell down on the ground screaming because it'd be so easy. I still just can't understand it, how this could be here.
Only the residents of the immediate area know about this hazard. They call it the Bridge to Nowhere. The nickname isn't new. At the time of the accident, it had been 10 years since the bridge collapsed. In the neighborhood nearby, Deborah remembers it very well.
In 2013, we had a very hard rainfall that just continued and turned into a major flood. It was a mess. The whole neighborhood was a mess. The road had broken, the bridge itself had collapsed, the pilings were destroyed.
And the deterioration of the local infrastructure just continued from there, with no repairs whatsoever. Meanwhile, Deborah moved heaven and earth trying to get the bridge rebuilt.
I wrote letters to Senator Allran. His secretary answered them, saying the state wasn't responsible. Of course, the city wasn't responsible because we're in the county, and the county wasn't responsible. And nobody would do anything.
Delving through old documents,
Would you like to see them?
Deborah discovered who was responsible. Her whole area was originally built by a trio of real estate developers called Keener, Shook, and Tarleton.
This is my, when I purchased the house, I kept all the records. This is just the owner policy. Then I found this is signed by Keener, Shook, and Tarleton, if you'd like me to read it. All roads in this subdivision are hereby declared private and shall not be maintained by the North Carolina Department of Transportation.
It's therefore private investors who are responsible for the bridge, not public officials.
The maintenance of all streets and roads in this subdivision shall be the responsibility of Keener, Shook, and Tarleton.
Deborah and her neighbors have tried without success to take the developers to court. Only one of them is still alive today. James Tarleton is an influential man in the region, known for his philanthropy and numerous developments.
Is a very well-known developer. So he developed this whole area and bought all the land.
Since the tragedy, Tarleton and associates at his offices, based in Hickory, have remained tight-lipped. He hasn't responded to a single media request.
I can take your name and number and I'll have his secretary contact you.
Thank you for your welcome.
We were no exception.
You too, take care.
The senseless death of this family man shocked the nation. A significant lawsuit is in the works, claiming damages that could stack up to millions of dollars. One of the biggest law firms in Philadelphia is representing the victim's widow. James Tarleton is named in the lawsuit, but he's not the only defendant.
Can we pull that up on the big screen, the road that is no longer there on Google?
Also in the lawyer's sights is another influential figure, a digital one this time, the tech giant Google and its widely used GPS service, which has 1 billion monthly users.
This is the area where Phil was killed. That road was broken, and Google should have done what other people have done, what other GPS companies have done, which is to completely shut down that road and not mark it as a road where you can pass.
In fact, users of the service had already flagged the issue long before the accident.
And Google's response, which appears to be automated, says that the suggestion is being reviewed. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and that we will let you know once the changes are published. That concerned resident did not hear from Google, and people were still directed down that road.
Even after Philip's death, it took close to a year and the lawsuit for Google to finally adjust their map. To prevent more tragedies in a country with crumbling infrastructure and increasingly frequent natural disasters, some developers have caught onto a gap in the market. In Babcock Ranch, a boomtown in Florida, business is skyrocketing. Its unique selling point, properties advertised as hurricane-proof, in a development branded as the ideal city.
The hometown of tomorrow is being created today, here at Babcock Ranch. And I invite you to see for yourself all the impressive things that are happening here.
The man who dreamed up this project is Sid Kitson, a retired American footballer turned sustainable real estate titan.
And people will say to me, well, how can you be an environmentalist and build a new city? And I say, well, I think it's perfectly natural and right by preserving the natural flowways, by preserving the wetland areas, by using native plant materials, by hardening the infrastructure, by making certain that not only are the water and sewer and everything's underground, but all the electrical is underground. During Hurricane Ian, when again we had 150-mile-an-hour winds, we never lost power, we never lost internet service, and we never lost our water service.
Robin and Richard, a wealthy retired couple, were among the first to move in here 5 years ago. They wanted to live in Florida, but were concerned about hurricanes. In Babcock Ranch, they found the perfect home.
This particular home has all metal roof, and as you can see with the rivets and such, it's very, very stable.
Their reinforced roof is typical of the development's heavy-duty architectural approach.
Let me show you about the way it's built. The walls here are concrete, but they're concrete block, so it's about this deep, but it's also, there's rebar down the middle, as well as we had insulation sprayed down into the openings in the blocks. Yeah. So what this means is that these houses are very resistant to weather.
The entire house has been designed to withstand the elements. Reinforcing bars bolster the garage door, and the windows and doors are protected by a material usually found in bulletproof vests.
So these are storm shutters, but they're made of Kevlar, so they're very resistant to puncture. And so if there's anything flying through the air with the hurricane, this is most likely to stop it.
Thanks to this wealth of protection, the couple were left unscathed by Hurricane Ian in September 2022, one of the most violent storms in Florida's history. Classed as a Category 4 hurricane, it made landfall with record intensity. 150 people died and more than 2 million lost power. The region was devastated, except for Babcock Ranch.
And this, of course, is the eye, and this crosshairs over here is where we're located.
Behind their Kevlar shutters, Robin and Richard had a front row seat to the action.
And it's pretty scary. That was like the strongest part of the storm, about 125 mile an hour winds. The storm shutters hardly moving.
In Babcock Ranch, every structure is designed to endure winds exceeding 260 kilometers an hour, a commitment that's unmatched by any other building code in the country. The city is also the first American community entirely powered by solar energy. An immense expanse of 700,000 solar panels already supplies enough energy to power 30,000 homes. Because visionary developer Sid has big plans for his project. He's even built a school with 940 places up to high school level to attract more families.
Well, we're approaching about 10,000 people. We, within 2 years, by 2026, will have 20,000. And then when we finish Babcock Ranch, it'll have about 55,000 people that will be living here. You'll probably have another 10,000 that work here.
So what's the price tag on this idyllic life shielded from disaster? Kevin, an IT consultant, and Alina, who works in HR, have come from Phoenix, Arizona to visit the show homes.
These are both the same home. These are both Charlotte's.
This house cost $600,000, double the price of the cheapest model.
It's got the decorative glass in it, but on the inside, it's still hurricane impact. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wow. Oh, nice.
The prices may be geared towards well-off buyers,
I love that.
but they're competitive for this part of Florida. For Kevin and Alina, who lived in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, the investment is worth it.
I'm going to move into a community that's thinking about these things, that's thinking about, a safer way to push electricity to these houses and not have overhead lines that have the potential of falling when a hurricane force gale comes along and cracks a pole.
This new kind of community is emblematic of the United States two-speed system in which only the most fortunate can access reliable infrastructure. The rest will have to wait for the government to finally rebuild their country from the ground up.